Welcome, everyone. My name is John Ramus. I'm the lead pastor of Kingdom Culture Ministries, and today's show is called Kingdom Life, and we have a very special guest, Dr. Ken Keese. And welcome, Dr. Ken Keese. And today we're going to be talking about personalities. So why don't you lead us off in a discussion?
Well, first of all, John, thanks very much for having us on the show, and welcome viewers and listeners. And so today we really want to dive deep into my book, Why Aren't You More Like Me? So have you ever met somebody, John, for the very first time? You've never any history with them, and you come into a party or a get-together, and right away you kind of don't like them?
Yeah.
And have you gone to a party and you have no history of this person, and right away there seems to be a chemistry?
Right.
So we was trying to talk about that we are uniquely designed and born with certain traits, or we call preferences. Other people call it personality. We call it personal style in our model. And the reason we do this is that we believe that we're uniquely designed for the purposes that he's created us for. So there are some people that that are very attention to detail is very, very high. Other people who are more expressive, other individuals who are more caring and caregiving roles. No right, not wrong, just different. And I think one of the things that we have to take responsibility if we really want to contribute at the highest level in the kingdom is that we need to know what those preferences are and how those preferences need to play out, because we believe that we're uniquely created for the purposes he has pre-assigned for us, and that the personality or personal style that we have is perfectly suited to fulfill that. Mm-hmm. Now, we all have things that we have to grow and develop, because every style, as we call it, has both positives and stuff.
Mm-hmm. Right. I mean, you see that being exercised in a relationship, husband and wife. You see that exercise in church leadership. God purposely will bring somebody like an accountant type of personality, and the pastor might be somebody who kind of takes more risks, and they're kind of fighting against each other. There's a balance to find out and a wisdom to be in the middle of that.
Absolutely. Now, interesting enough, our personal style indicator goes back over 40 years when we're taping this, because we had some concerns with some of the other tools that were created that were in the marketplace that weren't necessarily honoring to the diversity. So there are some out there that might be colors or animals, and we're more complex than that. So we use a 4-dimension model. It's called behavioral action, affective expressive, cognitive analysis, interpersonal harmony. But we're all blends of that, and we're also different intensities. And all of those uniquely combined for our pattern or our profile. And so our bias, and of course, I've been working with this information now for 30 years. I've done over 3,000 programs, 1,000 on this content alone.
Wow.
And I just don't believe that anybody should be out there without it. In fact, there was research done by one of our competitors said that only 2% of the population will realize the potential without this knowledge. Because everything we do that you were talking about, John, every relationship, any interpersonal connection, and also all our career choices, where we're going to, requires or engages us, our personhood. And so this is no accident, because if we're all the same, what would that be like?
Right.
So God created us uniquely so that we could serve in our best place. And however, I can't do that intentionally unless I know who I am. The second part, as you've already alluded to, John, is that a lot of us, get into relationships with people who are different. Probably you need that different person, like you said, the accounting person on the committee or the board at church. And of course, they're an irritant because they're asking all these details, but that's exactly who you need on the team so that you can have a balanced approach, a full approach, and you have all these different perspectives coming into one space.
Yeah, like if you were to ask my wife, she would tell you that I'm really different.
Aren't you now, John?
We all know that. But you see that, I've talked about this in the book of Genesis. There's so many firsts. And the book of Genesis sets a lot of precedences for the entire Bible. And there's one precedence that Dr. Ken Keese talked about, the precedence of differences. When God created Adam and Eve, he created them both different, but with an equal important purpose for God to work through.
Absolutely. And I think about so many biblical stories and the disciples and the ones that were called that were different. So Moses and Aaron. So different individuals. So Aaron's going to be the spokesperson. Why is that? Why didn't Moses do it? Because that wasn't what he was called to do. So leadership is really about, again, playing to these strengths. The other one is a lot of times, and this happens because my wife used to work at a church. I've been, committee member, a chair of a Christian school. Is a lot of times people volunteer and they're not appropriate for the position. And this is a tough part for us in leadership where, yes, thank you very much, John, but it's not your gift.
Right.
And so rather than being offended by this, is that we want you to play to your strengths. Now,
Right.
again, as I said, all of us have stuff that we have to work on. So example is, let's say I'm very expressive as you are, John, and you're communicating. Well, expressive people also dislike structure, or sometimes they hate the D word, which is discipline, which is, can you make sure you be on time? So they might have a tendency to overpromise and underdeliver, even if you're a believer. It's just that tendency. So I need to manage self. So we make a statement, either you're in control of your style is in control of you.
That's good.
So we have these preferences, which is great, which is a strength. But at the same time, I need to mitigate or lower or address the concerns that come with it. Example, somebody who is very good at details, we call it cognitive analysis. So they have the gift to see what's not there. So there's 100 words in an essay, 99 spelt right, one spelt wrong. Which one are they going to notice? The one that's wrong. And that's gifted. Thank goodness there are high sea airplane mechanics, because otherwise we'd crash. However, if I bring that same critical nature into all my relationships, and I only point out, John, every time you mess up or you do something incorrect, then that is going to stress the relationship. It's not going to be something that's building and nurturing. And so I need to bite my tongue and manage myself and say, excuse me, I'm not going to criticize John, because it's not worth it. It's to try to be right all the time is not really walking in that love. And then other styles like behavioral action, very driven, goal-oriented. You want that in the leadership team so you can get things done. However, they sometimes could be less sensitive to your emotions, be impatient. I mean, even coming here before we're filming, I was impatient in the coffee line at this coffee shop because I was served like seventh after all these other people because they couldn't make the coffee that I wanted. So I was even being tested on the way to doing our show together.
That's when it's handy to have a flamethrower and just fire the place up. I'm just kidding. No, it's great. Keep going. I'm really liking what you're sharing.
Well, I mean, again, even if we think about parenting, teamwork, so a lot of times we want our kids to be like us. And that's really not fair to them. So with our tools, the personal style indicator, we've used it in high schools or education right at 15 years and older, because they basically have to discern what the words mean in the word list and then to be able to determine who they are. So I remember doing a class when my kids were in grade 8 and grade 9. And it was one of the individuals in the room says, oh, now I know why I dislike you. And of course, he was having fun. And this other girl would just never shut up in class. And that was the nature of her style. And it was just irritating to this friend of my son's. And so he just articulated, says, now I get why you're being talkative. So it was no offense made, but they were just being friendly. Now, we use this in businesses all around the world. It's in 13 different languages. Wow. And recently we had one of our clients, he has a small building company, so you have some background in that. And he phoned me, he says, listen, this assessment has saved a relationship at work, and it's explained. He says, well, I'm very driven and goal-oriented, but my assistant is very thoughtful and she's very detail-oriented. That's why she's there. But she said, if it wasn't for us both taking this assessment and us understanding each other, I was going to quit because I hated you. And it wasn't that he hated him. It was just that his behavior, he had no patience for her. He didn't stop to listen to her. He was moving on to the next item, and he didn't give her the space. And it helped her, first of all, to realize he didn't wake up this morning to try to offend you, John. He said, no, that's just sort of how he's working. On the other side, he needed to take responsibility to stop, to listen, to pay attention. And so all of us have these different strengths. So one of the other styles who seem to be the really nice one called interpersonal harmony. So they have the gift of compassion. How these people work, John, in palliative care, I have no idea. Thank goodness God has wired people to be able to give in that way. However, the other side of that is that they don't like conflict. So I remember I was a consultant to a church, and the senior pastor was very high interpersonal harmony. He avoided conflict to the point where the congregation blew up. In other words, instead of really stretching to deal with the issues that were going on in his congregation, he avoided them. And so again, we all have these challenges. Great, he was a great shepherd, and he was serving people, and he had a lot of caring qualities, but the leadership qualities to deal with conflict was something he needed to grow and to develop.
Right. And that's important to know as your blind spots as well. And I want to go back to that, what you started off on saying that, sometimes in church, oftentimes even I find that a lot of people don't use wisdom in how to run a church, establish a church, govern a church. And you made the point that you can have somebody who volunteers for a position, but they're not actually really fit for that. Mm-hmm. So understand that it's important for you to not become offended when that happens, but instead to try to move into where you fit. It's like a key in a lock. You could be the one key, and there could be 4 locks, and once you find that place that you fit best, that's where you're going to excel.
Well, that's interesting, because the majority of individuals, in spite of all these assessments being out there over the years, actually don't know who they are. So how could I make intentional, wise decisions to say yes where I need to say yes? But the other thing for success is also to say no where you're not a fit.
That's good.
And so I know, John, you asked me to do this XYZ, but it's not a fit for me. So John understands my strengths, and so I articulate that. So when you get in these team meetings, these board meetings, these volunteer groups, and being a board chair, you have different individuals that are on there as well, is can I be intentional with where I place people? Now, you start getting into businesses, you get into organizations. How do you hire the right person? So the stats is that around 80 or 90% of people, Christians included, dislike what they do for mildly irritate the loathe. They're highly stressed. And so what occurs when I'm not in a job or a role or a career that's a fit. Now, interests, gifts, and talents are separate, and we'll talk about that in a different show around my purpose book. But with that is that if I'm not in a job or role that's mostly playing to my strengths, now there's always things that, John, you and I have to do as business owners or leaders of ministries that we don't want to do. Fine. But can I have the majority of what I'm doing playing to that strengths? And here's why. Because when you are playing to your strengths, when you're doing what you are naturally designed for, it energizes you. You have more to bring to the table. And this is why this global stat of 142 countries that Gallup did is that it actually was 87% of the population were disengaged. Even a quarter of the population were actively disengaged, meaning they were sabotaging the people that were happy. And so you can't have performance, you can't have productivity, but also this energy. I don't want to get into new age stuff, but really this positive relationships occur when I'm not feeling stressed. So you're doing yourself a disservice. Now, I remember speaking at a conference, and one of the individuals who is a Christian wrote a book, You Need to Fire Somebody. And one of the things that he was talking about is a lot of times as believers, we tolerate people in positions too long. Right. Because it's not a fit. And he said, I went into this office, I took a long time to let this person go, but I let them go. And they came back to me later and they said, Ken, thanks for letting me go. It was, I was stuck. Yeah. And you helped me to release that, and I'm enjoying life way more as a result of that.
I got caught up in that. And let me just mention something else again about the book of Genesis. In the beginning, when God gave Adam work, he didn't give him a job. He gave him work which is attached to his purpose. Why do I say that? Because oftentimes people pick a job because of how people viewed the job. You get prestige or you make lots of money, and it's not actually the right job for you. So for example, you could choose to be a lawyer or a doctor, and it's not the right fit. You might actually finish and complete it and get to the end of it and absolutely hate your job. And I got caught up in that whole thing. I wish that there's so many things that I could go back and redo in life. And I even talk about this with my mother. I wish that we could do life twice, that I could go back and tell myself at 30 or 20 what I know now. Because I went through so many of those things. I was in the wrong type of job, wrong place, and I hated it. I remember this one job, and it wasn't the city's fault. The city of Vancouver, I worked for the waterworks department. I've never hated a job more in my life than that job because I was not the right fit. And thankfully, I did get fired through this kind of whole weird thing that happened. But the point is, you know what it's like when you're in the wrong place. And so, even in ministry, you can be in the wrong place and absolutely hate what you're doing, and you can be fighting with yourself within. But keep going. I like what you're sharing.
Well, the other thing is the Holy Spirit matures and grows us. So we can get into jobs where there are some things that are uncomfortable, and we can grow into it. But if we're thinking about society's mindset rather than biblical mindset, example, people believe that being upwardly mobile is to be expected. So we had a client, large client, 6,000 employees, and their number one employee, this was a retail store, was a cosmetic person that worked the counter. And for years, they wanted to promote her to be a supervisor. She never wanted to be a supervisor. And so that if you are placed in a place, if you're a garbage collector, and I'm not demeaning that role at time, wherever you are placed and you're enjoying, then allow yourself to stay there. And so stop trying to promote this person when they don't want to be promoted. When I did my MBA research before I did my doctorate, is that I did 40,000 pieces of data on job satisfaction. And it was interesting, as people were promoted, their job satisfaction went down. Because they get drawn into, oh, I'm going to have more money, I'm going to have this more responsibility, it's prestigious. Or here's what happens. Sometimes the enemy tries to deceive you and say, oh, John, I've got this 100K job across the city over here for you to do it.
Right.
You go there for the money, and it's not what you should be doing at all.
Right.
And so we can have the lures of the world pull us away from where the zone we're supposed to be in. So I think we want to be comfortable in whatever that space might be. You know, I grew up on a dairy farm. Now, I knew that wasn't where I was supposed to stay, and I had a dairy farm for a while, and I made the most difficult decision. I am the firstborn, third generation male, Eastern European descent. All the pressure was, Ken, you're going to stay on this farm. When I left the farm, you know, and my family understands now, you know, they said, you betrayed us. We did all of this for you. So my comment to parents or people that have family members, please remove your judgment of what I should or shouldn't do. You know, my son now is in his 20s as we tape this. He's a very, very successful realtor. He did several different jobs. And one of the things, because he's an experiential learner, we helped him to understand that he needed to go through this journey of this clarity to find his space. You know, to do what I wanted him to do. We see that what happens all the time. A lot of times where most family-owned businesses don't make it past the third generation because they're not suited for it. It's not right for them. Right. It's not their calling. It's not their assignment, which is different than personality. And I think we need to be open to that we embrace and we allow people to go in those directions. I remember being at our kids went to a Christian university, Trinity Western here in Langley, British Columbia. And I was at a parent prayer meeting. And it was interesting, this different culture, this person was there where he said, well, this is what our daughter's going to do. And all of us said, well, why is she going to do that? Well, you know, this is sort of the family tradition. And so there's a lot of cultures that really have this controlling, I don't want to say oppressive, but expectation that you should go down this certain path. And I think that we need to be free. Now, you remember when Jesus started to collect his disciples, he said, well, what about, you know, my brothers? What about my sisters? Said, leave them behind. And so I'm not saying it's easy in that you want to do it in love, but there are times where you need to choose your own path. It was not easy for me to leave the dairy farm and start getting into this, but it's interesting. Give me an audience of 200, 300, 3,000 people in the content areas that God has equipped me to teach, and I am on fire, right? Give me an accounting book, and I'm just ready to maybe, you know, I would never do it, commit suicide, but you feel like it, right?
Yeah.
You just feel burden, right? Now, we all have those days where the enemy is attacking us. But the majority of your life should be fulfilled. It should be energizing. And that's where style comes in. And also, we had another homeschooling parent in our church. And so she bought the book, Why Aren't You More Like Me? And she read that. And it was interesting because their 12-year-old daughter came over and says, Mr. Keys, thank you for having the book, Why Aren't You More Like Me, for my mom. And I said, why is that? She says, she's way nicer now. And part of what happened is the learning style of her daughter was different than how she was teaching, how she wanted to engage life. She started understanding how she wanted to teach, and it just nurtured amazing family, awesome, you know, spirit-filled family. But they started to understand the differences, honoring those differences, and then really having the children embrace who they are. And then the two daughters, who were, I think it was 9 and 12, they were all both different as well. And so just the differences in them and saying, you know what, you don't need to be like your sister. You are uniquely yourself.
Yeah, and I even had a discussion with Chris a couple of weeks ago. He said, I mean, overall, my kids are very well behaved, but he said, sometimes your kids act out a little bit. And I said, well, Chris, you haven't had kids. When you have kids, you realize there's a delicate balance. You can't be too harsh, but you can't be too lax. And you kind of have to let them kind of go a little bit their own way, because I've seen parents where they're so harsh, so critical, and the kids feel so confined. And I tell you, that's an atomic bomb waiting to blow up. And so there's a delicate place. We try to, it's like going down the freeway. You got your two sides that kind of keep you on the street. There's like a buffer, a little wall, and you kind of want to be that as parents, the husband and the wife, and keep the kids going down the route, but you got to give them some flexibility to make some mistakes, make some choices. And the other thing I was going to mention is, it's funny how school is actually, there's, I think, how many learning styles is there, like 10 or something, or 12?
Well, in ours, we have 4 primary learning styles that lead into 21 different patterns.
Right. But our educational system is only built to really focus, or their system really works well with a very small percentage of that. And so if you're not in that, you find school very difficult and very challenging, because a lot of it has to do with memory, learning in a certain way. And so if you're outside of that, it's a challenge. And so I am somebody that's hoping that at some point, either somebody or will be part of that too, is change the system, come up with a system that helps people when you're outside of that typical model that's used in school. How can you help those people become not only educated, but how do they thrive?
Right. Well, one of the other assessments we have, I mean, we have 12 assessments in our company that have been developed over the last 40 years, is the learning style indicator and the instructional style indicator. And then, so we have a workshop called Why Don't You Teach the Way That I Learn, which is, based on the same information and helping people to understand that I take in information differently. Now, it's interesting. There's real controversy about this. Some people say, well, there is no difference in learning styles. Well, that's not true. My son, again, he is very auditory and experiential learner, but he's also a pilot. So he learned through air cadets, through checklists, to be able to do the right things. And so when he wanted to learn, he would ask his mom, who is a teacher, to come in and verbally go through the tests, practice tests that they would have. My daughter, on the other hand, is very much a learner who wants to be on her own. Get out of my room, don't bug me. I'm concentrating. She really disliked teachers who were chaotic and fragmented and didn't have organization and structure, because that's what she's a great operations manager, a great organizer, and that's her gift. She even worked for me at 13 in my print shop. Operating the equipment, having it all organized, having it all done. And my son, on the other hand, was doing the videos and all the creative side. Mm-hmm. So they've gone down pathway, and we knew that in advance. Now, if you're not honoring that with the kids, you're doing a disservice to them, right, and a disservice to yourself around those different components. Now, as we get closer to wrapping up the show, I want to share something that's unique and proprietary to our company. And that is that a lot of times people use this whole concept or word, introversion and extroversion. And we believe that the world has it incorrect in how they describe it, because they're trying to use something that came out of Myers-Briggs and Carl Jung's work, which was with abnormal psychology rather than normal psychology. So we actually embrace the one that Eysenck came up with over 60 years ago. And this is how it's different. So most of us know that there are some people who are oriented towards people, and some people are oriented towards task. So that's a continuum. So there's some people are very task-oriented, some people are very people-oriented, but there's other people who are very balanced. Introversion and extroversion in our model has nothing to do with people. It has to do with the biologically and how you're wired to see and experience the environment. So extroverts have less nerve fibers at the base of their brain, and so they see the environment as something to be influenced, to be controlled, to be told what to do. In other words, they're not fearful of the environment. They need to engage the environment to feel alive. On the other hand, people who are introverted see the environment where I need to be more careful. I need to be more cautious. I need to look before I act. Where extroverts will act before they look. Now, all of us are on a continuum on that as well. So there are some assessments that say that you're extroverted or introverted, but not both. There are some of us that are very balanced. So there's some people are extreme extrovert, some people are extreme introvert. When I say extreme, this number's in our model. So if I'm highly introverted, then I'm going to be deferring to what the environment is asking me. So an example is, let's say I come up to a red light. It's 3 o'clock in the morning in your city. There's no cars around, but the red light's not turning green. An extrovert more than likely will eventually just drive through the red light.
That's me.
Because the red light is, to an extrovert, is simply a suggestion.
Exactly.
Because red then means yellow and yellow means green, and then away you go. On the other hand, if I'm highly introverted, I might look at that red light, I'll wait longer, and I might get out of my car, even though there's no cars coming, push the walk button, and then once it turns green, I will go through. So it's not right, it's not wrong. I'm not asking anybody here to break the law, but it's a metaphor on how we see life. So there's some people who really want to engage life. And by the way, jobs, roles, and positions have introversion and extroversion levels. We actually have an assessment that measures that for job fit. So you measure the introversion and extroversion levels of a position. Does mine match so that I'm playing to my strengths beyond we call the personal style dimensions that we have. And then there's another dimension that we have in our model that talks about verbal and nonverbal. And that is the amount of language a person needs to communicate to feel understood. So some people, you send an email to them or a text to them, John, and then they send you like 5 pages back. And all they needed to say was, okay, yeah, we're filming tomorrow. Or the other side where you have 5 questions for Chris, and he says, okay, and you say, okay to what? It needed a detailed response. So again, not right, not wrong. So we use these items, these what we call dimensions, introversion, extroversion, people and task, verbal and nonverbal, and then we teach people how to read other people. Because the highest level of service, so even though we talked about we need to play to our strengths, here's the flip side, and especially from a biblical point of view as we wrap up this show, is that if I'm only going to be me, no, that's just the way I am, John, just take that. Well, then that is being self-centered. So the other side is I need to be in charge of self. And if I'm ultimately going to show you Jesus' love, but also my emotional and intellectual intelligence, then I'm going to suspend my needs in deference to you. So this is why I need to understand other people. So I need to know what John's needs are, what he needs. And then we teach people in this book and in our programs and workshops how, first of all, who are you? But then I need to put myself in suspension in deference to meet your needs, to build relationship with you, to build credibility with you. And then the final one is that we teach you then, what does John need from me proactively so that I can build relationship? So, obviously this is a 5 or a 6 or a 7 hour workshop, or even have a 2-day option. We're trying to capture that in this 30-minute show. So we thank you for watching and listening, but this gives you a snippet of this. Now, we do have a free gift.
Okay, great.
And that gift is if you go to KenKeis, KenKeis.com/kingdom, then we're going to give you a free copy of my Purpose book, The Quest for Purpose, an ebook that you can get from us for watching the show.
Right, and then there's other information they can get from the website. You also have a blog, and there's several books that you brought with you here today, and there's the one here that we're pointing out right now that's on the table.
Right.
So they can get that through the website.
Yes.
And if they have any questions, they can call you or message you through your website.
And we love to serve whoever it is around the world.
Wonderful. Okay, well, my name is John Ramos. I'm the lead pastor of Kingdom Culture Ministries. Thank you for joining us today. If God has put on your heart to sow a seed into our ministry, the website's on the screen at www.kccm.ca. If you have any questions, any comments, if there's any way we can help you, message us, and we'd be happy to help. You can give by credit card, you can give by check, you can do it through the website through PayPal. We're looking forward to the next program with Ken, so join us for that, and thank you for joining us today. Have a good day. God bless you.